Welcome back. In the past 24 hours, the cross-party UK Health and Education Select Committee has accused British government policy of threatening the mental health of children. It comes as the continuing Western economic crisis has led to funding cuts for mental health services. The committee also noted that half of all cases of mental illness in adult life start before the age of 15. But can mental health be closely correlated to overall health and susceptibility to serious disease? Resilience, a new film by James Redford, explores the concept of adverse childhood experiences and the dramatic effect that they can have on your mental and physical health as an adult. We caught up with him at the West End of London premiere of the film. James, tell me about the study, peer-reviewed study, that inspired the film Resilience.
Well, you know, they're back in the mid-90s. Two researchers, a doctor and a researcher, got together and did a landmark study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And as you mentioned, it's peer-reviewed, been looked at many times, and it's sort of accepted hard science now that children who are in chronically stressful environments, and I'm talking, neglect, abuse, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, mental illness in the home, incarcerated parent, ugly divorce, continuing drama. If they're in that kind of environment and they don't have support, there's a great risk that that environment will harm their health later in life.
Now, some people might think that's obvious and stands to reason. In the film, you have these questionnaires, which are seen as revolutionary, where patients are asked these questions beforehand. And that wasn't done before this study.
No, I mean, it's funny. It seems so obvious, and yet the science is just now getting into the cultural dialogue in the States. You know, I think when you have transformative science, and I think the reason it's transformative is I think we all know that a rough childhood is, you wouldn't wish that on any child, and obviously there's going to be emotional challenges and psychological challenges. But the idea that their brains and their bodies are literally altered by that stress, it goes from being a social, emotional issue to a neurotoxic issue. And so you're literally altering the brain. And the most important thing is to reduce exposure and to intervene and prevent harm, which you can do with, really pretty simple, straightforward connections to healthy adults. It doesn't have to be the parents.
If we're going to cross the street and a truck is coming at us, we have release of adrenaline. We have release of a hormone that we call cortisol. We want to jump out of there, and adrenaline and cortisol are going to help us do that. So there's that good amount of stress. But if all day long you're feeling like a truck is coming at you, day after day after day, that's going to take a toll on the body.
And the harm we're talking about is serious diseases.
Yeah.
Which cost a lot of money. Do you think people haven't focused so much on this, so as much as, say, I don't know, evolutionary biology, is because while it saves taxpayers money, this kind of thing, it doesn't really save drug companies and big corporations very much money?
Well, if in America we give ourselves about 20 seconds when we go to the doctors. It's a miracle that there's, what can a doctor learn with the way our system works right now in a few short minutes, which is the average length of a visit to the doctor. So, it's far easier to write a prescription and move on to the next patient than it is to say, no, wait a minute, let's take some time, and you're having inexplicable headaches and stomach. What's going on in your life? Tell me a little bit about what's happening. It seems pretty straightforward, but it takes the sort of time that if you really added it up, it would be a shift in how we provide health care, and that's what we're hoping is going to happen.
I should say that statistic is reflected in lots of G8 countries. It's management consultancies are figuring out the shortest time that doctors can see patients. But again, what is the reason that this kind of thing wouldn't have been analyzed before?
I've probably made, 7 or 8 documentaries at this point, both in this environmental and social realm. And I've encountered this pattern in other stories and other films, which is that when you have groundbreaking science, it just seems to take 15 or 20 years before it goes from the sort of the hallowed halls of academia, research, to just broader cultural understanding. It just takes time. And I think the other thing, too, is there's 2 things that you're working against. One is there are some taboo subjects involved. You know, if you're really going to get down on what people's childhoods are like, you're going to end up talking about things that in many cases people feel they shouldn't talk about. You know, children who are victims of abuse and neglect, whether it's physical or sexual or emotional, it's not something that people tend to open conversations with.
There were 10 types of diversity. We added them up. The first thing I looked at was smoking and saw that as the count of categories of ACEs went up, the percentage of people that smoked went up, and I was astonished. I'd never seen something like that before. And I started looking at all the other things like alcohol abuse and depression and teenage pregnancy and heart disease, and saw that as the score went up, all of these major public health problems that we collected as part of the survey went up in a stepwise fashion.
And obviously class and poverty are allied to those tick boxes.
Oh, absolutely. You know, poverty, growing up poverty is a stressor, a universal stressor that makes it that much harder to deal with things in healthy ways. But I think the big shock to me was that the prevalence of adverse childhood experiences extends all the way up the socioeconomic ladder. I mean, roughly, you know, the initial study that was done out of San Diego with the Center for Disease Control, the patients that was done, 20,000 patients, were largely upper middle class college graduates on the Kaiser Permanente health plan. So these folks were just the kind of folks that you would imagine would have lily white, fine childhood experiences. And, you know, in that population, it was staggering to see how much suffering was really going on.
28% had been physically abused. 27% grew up with substance abuse in their homes. 13% witnessed their mothers being physically abused. 1 in 5 had been sexually abused. I was the first person to see this data. I was in my study. I had the software on my computer. I saw this and I wept. I had no idea how much adversity and abuse and neglect and violence there was in our culture.
I know welfare entitlement's a big issue in the United States. We're in the middle of an election campaign here in Britain. In the film, the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" emerges in the film. You almost satirize the phrase. I mean, what would you say to politicians who say, you know, there's a meritocratic society, these people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps?
Well, I think, look, a little stress, some challenges, developing coping skills, it's necessary, you know. If you coddle kids too much, then they don't have any resilience at all. But on the other end of the spectrum, if children have unrelenting stress and they don't have people that they can count on, that they feel known and loved, then their chances of overcoming those experiences and having a healthy life, a productive life, is greatly reduced. And I come across people who say, well, you know, I had this happen and that happened and that happened, and I'm doing just fine. But a short conversation often reveals that maybe that's not true. It's a story we tell ourselves in America because, you know, it's the cowboy myth of, you know, you can do it on your own. When in fact, resilience is built. You know, you have to work at it. Some people might be gifted with incredible innate resilience, just the way some people are gifted with a particularly sharp intellect or musical skill or athletic skill. But you don't want to base your whole society's attitude about resilience based on a lucky few.
James Redford, thank you.
Thank you.